Everyone for being here for our panel. I'm Desmond Kon. I've got wonderful friends here and what our panel today is going to talk about is the challenges of literary editing, right? So if everyone wants to join us, that'll be great, okay? I have the pleasure of introducing these three very distinguished and experienced editors. Let me just pull up their bios. Here on my left is the publisher in the house, right? The bona fide publisher. He helms Ethos Books and Page Setters. He says he's got a dynamic crew that he's working with. And Ethos is an independent publishing house focusing on making books and supporting an environment for literature, the arts, and culture. And he's aware that his team is building on a regional network of translators, publishers for the circulation of fiction, non-fiction, and poetry, all right? On my extreme right, we have a wonderful writer and critic, Yen Chung, who is editor of several journals, Unoa Review. He edits fiction at the Cadaverine. He's assistant editor at Epicenter magazine and guest editor at Conium Review. He reviews for a couple of other journals. He too, like Kage, studied literature. He went to Warwick, and he's won several prizes. You know, the Indigo Rising Pantum Award, and actually at NUS, the Lit Society Creative Writing Competition, he won too. And I think Kai Chai also won that a long time ago, right? And Kai Chai, all of you know these people. These are just formalities. Kai Chai, a very good friend. He has written 3 amazing poetry collections, the last of which won the Singapore Literature Prize. He's also collaborated on 3 books with other friend authors, where they went to different countries and collaborated on those books. He has edited for newspapers and magazines for over 20 years, and was the Singapore Writers' Festival director before Puja and after Paul, right? And did a fabulous job. I finally got invited, thanks to Kai Chai, after he became a director. Okay, so I sent them a whole bunch of questions, and they're just going to, have a go at it. And my first question to them was, I know that they're all trained in literature, and I just want to know how your academic scholastic training actually influences the lens with which you do your editing. Okay, so why don't we start with with Ian, because Kai Chai is Kage is buzzing. Okay, Ian, from Warwick to now.
Okay, I must confess that I was a very bad university student of literature, in that for 3 years of undergraduate, I refused to read novels. Like, I avoided taking all the modules that had novels in them. So the only sort of like classic literary figure that I really like is Thomas Hardy, but that was from A-levels, because my tutor was kind of obsessed with one of his novels that we were doing for A-level. So actually, I like a lot of contemporary literature, especially when it comes to fiction. I think more what I come across as an editor of the magazine has influenced the kind of things that I like to read more so. So I'm very attuned to like the contemporary lyric, some of the experimental things, like Kai Chai's poetry I can appreciate, but there are certain things that are too experimental for me to understand and appreciate. So I think maybe my educational training hasn't really shaped the way that I read in the way that you might expect, because I was not a very dutiful student in that sense.
Okay. Thank you, Ian. Kai Chai.
I think I studied in NUS from 89 to 92 for the bachelor, but then honors in the 4th year, and I did a master's. I think Prof Ko Tayan is here, so I think she knows. My time was compulsory, the English lit, the module, so that you have to go through all the Middle Ages, Shakespeare, blah, 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 all the way to 20th century. to me, because I'm quite a lazy reader, I like the fact that it was mandatory. So I think it gave me a contextual knowledge of how literature evolved through the centuries and how it was contextualized against social and political times. So, and then I also did English language. So I would just say that it's not just literature, but English language, I did the linguistics and all the stuff. And I think that also grounded me in terms of the structural uses of language and how it broken down. So in that way, I think it gave me a very Catholic, sorry, don't use the word Catholic, a very universal way of looking at language. And therefore, even things which I normally would not like, but because I'm exposed to it, I can appreciate it, even if it's just like if I'm not into heavy metal, but I can say that it's a good heavy metal album. Similarly, I may not read certain kind of books if I were left to my own wits, but I would be able to say that it's a good book. Yeah. I guess that's my short answer to your question.
Yeah, it's very Catholic.
I said Catholic because you're here.
Yeah, actually,
I'm agnostic.
We were colleagues at 8 Days, 2 lifetimes ago. And Sinead O'Connor just passed her. You must have been devastated. Oh, right, he's wearing... Yeah, he loves Sinead O'Connor. Not very Catholic.
I would say...
as in Sinead.
No, I would say she is very Catholic.
Yes, actually, ironically, yes.
But let's not talk about it.
Let's not talk about that. Okay, let's go to Dear Kage. Dear Kage, who helms one of the most important publishing firms here. Come, Kage.
Like Kai Chai, right, I did linguistics and literature at university. So sometimes I feel that when you study something at a deeper level, what you invest is the attention, the time. Because when we read for leisure, right, we don't really have that expectation of setting aside very focused think time. So I think the discipline that I'm quite sure Ian was not as bad as he says he is. I mean, come on, Ian. But the kind of rigor that we go into when we read something at university, I think that really matters, because then when we start to look at sentences, when we look at a work, we start to look at it at different levels, because a work is not just a word, it is a sentence, it is a paragraph, and then it talks to other texts as well. So I think these are all what I really appreciate about having the chance to study literature at university and how it translates into our work. Yeah.
Thank you, Kage. And Kage also taught within the educational system in JC as well, right? So thank you. So everyone is, they do a lot of, as much criticism as they do the creative writing. So thank you so much. So my next question to them was, you've worked on different genres, fiction, creative non-fiction, poetry. So when you receive all these manuscripts as a journal editor or as a book editor, what do you think makes for good writing? How do you know this is the voice that you want and that you're going to publish? Who would like to have a go?
I go first.
Okay.
Actually, I feel that joining a publishing house and doing work as a professional, it starts to attune me to what it means to have a mission. Because each publishing house, right, you occupy a very specific niche. If you look at the few publishing houses in Singapore, we deal with subject matter that are very distinct, which is great, because if we are all doing the same thing, it actually takes away the heterogeneity of already a very homogeneous field, because all the economic pressures are pushing people towards doing the same thing, reading the same thing. Yeah. So for us, right, when I read as an editor for Ethos Books, I'm first of all asking myself, what must the publishing house continue to put out? That aligns us at the selection level. But once we select a manuscript, when we then approach and tackle the specific work, it will be a very, I would say, almost like a very hermetic, a very contained relationship between the editor and the author, which is the best kind of relationship, because you want a reader who is into you and your work. And that kind of relationship, to be able to be supported by, say, readers to do that, they buy the book and they support you, I feel that is really a privilege. So when you ask me when do we know we are serving our role well, is when I imagine the readers for Ethos books and I'm thinking, I think this work will make sense to Ethos readers. Yeah.
Wow, that's nice. That's nice. Thank you so much for carving out that space for authors and readers in Singapore. Thank you. Come, Kai Chai, as editor of QLRS, newspaper editor.
But I don't edit literary books for a job. So a journal is a bit different.
But the quota you edit for books too.
Yeah, but that's our books. Okay, but let's say someone comes to me or Ethos comes to me, would I want to edit certain books? Yeah. I would look for three things: voice, vision, and form. And we're going to touch on those later, but okay, voice in the sense that do I think this voice is unique, has an interesting way of putting words. So that involves language and tone. So all those things make the voice stands out. The other thing is vision. Vision to me is about whether this writer write with something in mind, with a world in mind, whether it's world building in a fantasy language, but something to do with does it evoke a particular world for me that I can imagine walking through, or this world is very abstract to the point where I can't. Then that doesn't work. The last is form, because it's what you see on print, or on, it could be spoken word, so it could be whatever form it takes. And if it's very conscious of the form in a way that it's become fused with the language, with the rest, that means the form has become part of DNA. So, those are the three broad things when I look for a book. If you're talking about a book per se, whether the book by itself can stand on its own 2 feet without knowing the writer background. Yeah. But that will be a different question later. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, Ian, and it has been around for over a decade, right?
Yes, it's been around since 2010.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been a while. I think I come at it from a slightly different perspective because I've never had to do the job of a commissioning editor, for example. There are just a lot of people, a lot of American people mainly, who are really desperate to be published in a journal, regardless of the quality of the work. It's a very American thing, and then they get offended when you turn them down. But that's another story entirely. So, like you've mentioned, the journal has been around for a really long time. I've been the only one who reads the submissions for that in the entire sort of 10 over the decade plus that it's been around, which means, so I think Joshua, lots of people here probably know Joshua, said it before once, I think on Facebook, that if we all died tomorrow and AI had to reconstruct personalities from whatever online artifacts are left behind of our civilization, right? The archive of Eunoia Review is probably one of the most comprehensive ways of reconstructing what interested one particular person in this whole sort of world, and what were the sort of things that they like to read. So I think for me as an editor, because I don't really have the issue of supply is greater than what I can accommodate, basically, right? Based on a purely practical point of view. So what I choose to publish is what interests me. It has to, in some way, bring pleasure to the reading experience. If I didn't want to read it, I wouldn't publish it. I think, because that question has come up a lot by people who get rejected. They're like, "What are you looking for?" And I'm like, I never answer the question because I don't get paid to edit the magazine, so I'm also not paid to engage with passive-aggressive people. And it's just it's better for my mental health not to engage with them, because then I just get really annoyed at having to explain things to people for why I'm turning down your work. And I think so. The short answer that I've come up with over time, if anyone really had to, if a friend asked, would be it's something that I'm interested in reading, and so hence if, when I die or whatever is still online of that is probably the most accurate representation of the things that interest me as a reader specifically. So I think I come at it from a reader perspective first and foremost.
Thank you, Ian. And we will talk about that author-editor relationship in a bit. And yes, editors do get a lot of abuse, right? I know, yeah. So this is the third question, all right? And I think Kai Chai should take this first. I asked all of them, what's the single most important aspect of a submission that will make you sit up and notice? Kai Chai, you mentioned form, you mentioned voice, vision. Can you...
So at the end of the day, one of these three that I just mentioned takes precedence. So I will say voice. For instance, the vision may be very different, like I may not be able to relate to it. And then the form may be alien or maybe very classical. But the voice, to me, should be the one that I will, after going through so many manuscripts or so many poems or so many short stories, I remember this voice and I will go back to it because this voice at the end of the day is, I can hear it. So to me, if it keeps me awake at night and keeps me thinking, so I'm going to use the film metaphor again. If a film makes me think about, let's say I just watched Oppenheimer, right? Now I was thinking about what's going on there. It keeps me thinking about it at night. Then that's the scene. In this case, the book the manuscript that I should go back to. Okay. So it doesn't matter that the voice, I understand it, but it's a voice that attracts me and wants me to go back to it again and again. I don't really care for stuff that I can understand from A to Z. I only want to feel the presence of someone who I want to get to know better. Oh. Yeah, almost like speed dating.
Oh, wow. Okay. No, great. Nice. Kage?
Yeah, a little inflection, but very similar. I think voice also, when you're listening to a voice, right, there's a chemical reaction between you and the person who issued that voice, right? So this is chemistry. And that chemistry can come in so many ways. I was reading a book by an Italian publisher. His name is Roberto Calasso. And then he says that he publishes because of singularity. Certain moments, right, when things come together, it's like the precise person at the precise time, at the precise situation. This is the person to give voice to this story or this poem. And that means that you don't even have to be a professional writer to be able to be published, because you could be that person to say that something, and it could be what you call a one-hit wonder, but that could be just that hit that you need for your whole life, maybe. So when we get a manuscript, I'm just remembering Felix Cheung, thank you for referring Linda Collins to us. Linda Collins wrote a memoir about the loss of a daughter due to suicide. I was at a book sale at United World College, and there was no books being sold. It was very quiet. So I started to pull out that manuscript, right? And I started to read it. And then I forgot about the book sale. My colleague was like, never mind, just go and read. So I was reading and reading. Over the space of 2 hours, right, I think I just was reading, deep reading. And I thought that, wow, this is one of those books that, we really have to do. And I still had to check with our editorial team, but I text my editor, then Suning, and I say, Suning, you have to read this quickly read it, because luckily we have a lot of time now, so I can read it. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much. I mean, I've got so many questions. Actually, I want from segueing from Ian's point that his selection process is quite different from, say, a commercial publisher. I think you should chime in at that point in time how much the commercial pressures actually weigh into your editorial decision making, right? But Ian, what do you feel about the single aspect that you're looking for when you take something?
I like what Kage said about sometimes a writer can they really may just be a one-hit wonder. They have that one book or that one manuscript that just clicks for you as the editor. So I think from my own experience, like there have been writers who have submitted, say, 5, 6, 7, dozens of times, and it's always a very clear-cut no, to me at least. And then there's just that one time where there was one poem out of the 10 that they sent in that clicked. There was something in there that spoke to me as the reader, and that I thought deserved to get a wider audience. And then after that, it goes back to sort of dozens of packets of poems that are just not right, you know? That's the line that I use whenever I turn people down. That it's not right for us, which really just means me. But it doesn't mean that someone else out there is not going to resonate with what you've written. That person just wasn't me at that particular time. So for me, I think it's quite serendipitous in a way. And what I'm looking out for really is a bit like what Kai Chai was saying. There's something about the voice of the writer in that particular piece, maybe just that one poem or just that one story in a whole packet. Or maybe like if it's just one paragraph out of a whole story, I won't take the story, but I might reply to tell them that there's something in that paragraph. If you want to work on it and come back, because like the rest of the story just doesn't work for me, but there's something in that one paragraph or that one idea that I think you can work with and write something better.
Oh, that's nice. Even for you'd be willing to go the extra mile.
Yes, I give free editorial advice.
Yeah, darling journal editor.
I used to do it much more often in the early days because I was a student back then and I had a lot of time. And then once I started work, I was like, I have no time to do this for free. Like people should be paying to get this kind of feedback, you know, essentially. So it rarely happens these days.
Okay, journal editing is quite a different sort of ball game compared with, say, book editing. Journal editors don't actually feel that they should even give more than the standard rejection sometimes, unless you do see something really exciting and are willing to publish, right? So thank you. It's very interesting because the other journal editors, never mind. Okay, I'm not going to talk. Okay, let's go into the editing. Okay. All right. So what are some very specific things you pay attention to when you're editing? Say a collection of poems, and then let's just go into other things about the production process too, covers, typography, layout, and if we have time, we can even talk about marketing, the whole machine, right, of publishing. So books, Kage, come tell us.
You mean the process?
Of editing. Why don't we start first with, say, sequencing and maybe even edits in poetry. Poetry is very hard to edit, right? So how do you approach going to a poet and saying, you spent 10 years on this, but I really think you could change up the chapters, or this voice doesn't work, take out, these 5 poems. Do you ever do that stuff to a poet?
Wow. So actually, when a writer submits manuscript, when a poet submits the manuscript to you, right, there is already a responsibility. Because nobody writes because you just want to have fun. I mean, seriously, you can say, I had fun doing it, but would you really subject yourself to the pain of having to think about what is good, what is not good, and then put it into this form, and then take that leap to give it to a person who's going to criticize it? It is a really difficult endeavor. So I think that is the baseline that we have to approach submissions. And the rejection always comes because there are a lot of other factors, but it will be taken the wrong way, whatever, seriously. All rejections are taken not the best way, because why would you feel good about being rejected? So I think this is the kind of a mindset that we already have when we run a publishing house. We are never going to be able to honor the person's sincerity in sending the work to you, but we have to do our work. So when you say, then when we accept a work as well, I remember this one is with Hamid Roslan, Past Tree, Forest Fire.
Yeah, it's a very good book.
It's a very good book. And I told Hamid, Hamid, if you want this book to sell, you need to take away this part. Then he was like, no, I won't do it.
You told Hamid that?
Because I know Hamid has enough thick skin to tell me.
Wait. So the version I have that you published
is the original.
Thank you.
Because Hamid said that, I don't care. I don't care. Yeah, then I said, great. So you must know. So in a way, I also preface his expectation by saying that this book will not be that, hotcake poem, right? Which is great. Yeah. But I think there is a responsibility to the author who comes to you. Because when the author comes to you, right, they need to know what are the possible pathways for a collection. Do you want it to be more readable and more read, or do you want it to be how it is? Okay. And I don't think it's fair to just like shortchange the process and say, I love it, let's go with it, everything is good. But that book is super demanding, right? So that's why in the end, I think I also scored some negative demerit points with Hamid for even asking.
Really? Oh.
Yeah, Hamid felt that, hey, are you trying to do something to my work? So I said, no, hold on. I'm just telling you, if you want it to be better accepted.
I'm sweating. Okay.
Yeah, so how difficult is this, right? But at the end, right, then we went with what it was. So don't worry, everything that you have read is how he wanted it. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's fine. It's fine. Wow. No, this is great. The origin stories of books. Thank you, Kage. Come, and I know Kai Chai cares a lot about design, and he's such an aesthete. So everything, let's cover design. I know even for your book that, Dark Tower, that one, you're very particular about the way that the cover would be.
Yeah, I have a fetish for books, yeah. Now, basically, paper, typography, binding, fonts, all these are very important to me. To me, the materiality of books, it's very often overlooked. I don't want to be cast anyone or throw anyone under the bus, but I will, in the sense that some publishers will print certain ways in order to keep the cost low. I think, depending on the budget, they can do it, but not at the expense of the poems. Okay. So, do you want me to talk about my poems or editing other people's work?
Both, anything.
No, I think
expert
I
in
will
house.
keep to the topic. I will just say editing other people's manuscripts. So,
okay.
I think, for instance, someone here, a very established poet, has approached me sometimes and me and some other writer for feedback onto their manuscript. Don't know where that's around. Never mind. So, I think when someone approaches you with the manuscript, you would treat it with the fact that the fella know who you are. I'm not a mysterious editor. Maybe in your case, they don't know you, right? But in that case, they know what I'm about. They come with certain expectations. I also know who this person is. So when the fella shows me his or her manuscript, I will want to read it from beginning to end. I don't want to talk to you. I just want to read it first, so that I can make up my objective assessment of whether this manuscript is a good manuscript, rather than based on I know you, so I think it's like this or that. And then if I feel that it's a manuscript that needs a lot of work, then I will come back to you and say that I want to hear why you write this way, and then I will advise, say, for instance, the sequence, or maybe go back to the word that I like to use, energy or chi, right? Which is when you read a manuscript, certain parts lose energy. I'm going to use the movie again. So when you watch movies, certain scenes are boring. Why is that so? So I may suggest changing the sequence, or maybe some poems, maybe a bit lax, so the energy laxes. So so I think that's one way I will tell fella why I think you could write something else, or sequence differently, or cut out certain things.
So since we're there and we're already talking about that relationship, right, and that conversation with the author as editors, what happens when you encounter like that situation where you get a lot of resistance to your advice? So how do you close that
for
gap?
instance, I think Kage has looked at our manuscript before. Remember, the adopted.
The adopted. Yeah.
Okay, I think in
which you all published, yeah.
Well, I think in the past, while I was a first-time writer, as in I kept my mouth shut when I was with Landmark. Yeah. And then there were certain points taken out. I kept my mouth shut because I thought they know better, right?
Right.
Yeah. Then when I...
What was that? Secret Manta?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
you see, I don't even know that.
Okay, doesn't matter.
Okay,
the point is...
This is more than 25 years ago.
The
Secret Manta.
the relationship between the second, not the first time writer with the editor is slightly different already.
Yeah.
Because I think you are more confident, you sort of know, and then you may push back more. I mean, come on, first time poets would not want, first time published poets would not want to push back so much.
Well, not for Hamid. Hamid pushed back. That was his first
But
book.
I think I speak from a time when there was not as many opportunities to get published.
Yeah.
I think Hamid's time, which is now, there are a lot of avenues to get published. The truth is that at our time, you had to join Singapore Lit Prize or join something to get published at all, or maybe get some kind of, some kind of acknowledgement from some people in the, ivory tower.
Okay.
Otherwise, you would be marginalized, or especially the kind of writing that I do.
That time,
I never had that.
Yeah.
Can I quickly bracket something here?
Okay.
Yeah, because I think we are also looking at oppositional kind of dynamics where you push back. But actually, I would say that the way that Hamid said no, right, it was not really that kind of dynamic. It was more like, this is A, this is B, where would you like to go? Yeah. So it's not exactly say, can you do this? No, I don't want to. That kind of, because that kind of editorial dynamics, I also believe it exists, and it can be very painful. It's like Raymond Carver suddenly, after he got so upset, then he said, George Leach, get out of my life. I'm going to publish my new set of short stories without you inside. That kind of psyche that comes when you are oppositionally engaged with each other, I don't think it's very healthy for both parties. That's what they say about authors and publishers. It's like a marriage, right? You don't want it to be a bad marriage. Can I add on
to the oppositional thing that you're talking about, dynamics? I mean, I immediately thought of a dynamic between two modernist poets whom you know, Ezra Pound and T.S. Eliot. Which manuscript is it? Is it the Wasteland or the Four Quartets? Where Ezra Pound, I think maybe some of you may know better, was responsible for excising a lot of the front part. And then what you see is a lot of Ezra Pound's work. So the editors in that manuscript was very crucial. And Ezra Pound, in some estimation, in a way created T.S. Eliot. So I think it all depends on the dynamic that you have with the editor, whom you trust or you don't trust. Or whether you are coming cold. I mean, for instance, if I send my manuscript to Kage doesn't know who I am. I think that's fair. Yeah. But if I have a long-standing relationship with him, he knows what I'm about, and I think that's fair. There's a kind of opposition, there's some kind of back and forth. But I think for manuscripts or for journals, like when I do my QRS, 99% I don't know who they are.
Yeah, which is an interesting dynamic. Okay, let's just go. Ian, can you chime in? And also because, Ian, you're working on an online journal, and so I think you also know a lot about how digital everything is going. So why don't you chime in on a question much later down, sort of the technological demands on publishing now. Kai Chai talked about the materiality of the book artifact. What do you feel about this whole e-book push, digital publishing push as well? So everything. Yeah, just
everything.
Yeah.
I mean, so when I was at university, I had a friend who was a big proponent of ebooks, and I just told him, "You're a heretic," because it's convenient, but it's not going to replace the physical book as an object. And I think the current sort of sales trends have proven my assessment of it right, in that ebook sales did grow, but they didn't entirely cannibalize the physical book as an object that people want to own and to buy. And I think one of the things that, let's talk about maybe crowdfunding. I think one of the things that crowdfunding like Kickstarter has enabled is a lot of bespoke projects to make physical books that would not otherwise get made by your big five publishers, because it's not the kind of project that makes commercial sense. Like, it requires a high investment in very customized sort of binding, paper quality, embossing the cover, that sort of thing. But those are the things that if you can get people to crowdfund your project, you can spend as much money as you need to make a very beautiful physical object. You know, like Kachai would love that kind of ability to customize all these things, I'm sure. And I think that's what the digital age has allowed, to a certain extent, these kinds of projects to find their willing market. So I myself have spent a lot of money on Kickstarter projects, Kickstarter publishing projects, for things that they're not commercial. They're all like small indie publishers putting out bespoke editions of books, and it's just nice to have physical books that look nice in a way. When I was a lot younger, I made fun of a friend who said that they buy the book based on the cover. I'm like, oh, how shallow of you. Like, clearly what is important is what's inside the book. And then I got older, like maybe only like 5 years older past that, and I was like, actually covers matter a lot. Like, sometimes the cover is really not that nice, and I'll buy so like UK and US editions, like the design aesthetic sometimes is very different. And I try to, like, my own system is like, if they're an American author, I'll buy the US version of the book lah. But sometimes it's really very ugly, and like the UK one just looks nicer or whatever, and like, okay lah, I'll just buy the UK one instead, you know, and then I'm locked into like buying the UK ones, but that's a whole separate matter. So I think as the idea of the materiality of the book as an object, I think it isn't going to go away anytime soon. I guess it is partly a form of nostalgia for some people, at least for the people who grew up with the pre-digital age. I'm old enough that I sort of saw the transition, you know, from no internet to got internet these days. So I'm quite nostalgic for like nice books sometimes lah.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, so, you know, all three of them have got, you know, amazing management and organizational experience under their belt, right? So we know that journals take a lot of love, but also a lot of work. And of course, with running presses as well. So tell us, what are some of the most important things to care about managing a press or, you know, a team on a journal? Anyone?
Yeah. I think the reason why we are in a team, being more than one person, is because, right, when you're more than one person, you're building a culture. And that culture will pass on through different bodies. So tomorrow, if I'm not the publisher, the best thing that I can hope for is there's another person who can inherit the ideas and the ways of doing things. That is how publishing houses and basically any group, how it grows and continues. So I've been thinking a lot about this, because when you run a team, already the overheads will go up already. But if you do it yourself, wow, the freedom to me is so attractive. You can run around, you can even work offline, you can be different places, do one book a year, that kind of thing. And there's so much that opens up, but what am I going to lose with my team? First of all, I have a wonderful editor whom I know will continue to become even better. I have a wonderful marketing manager who is doing amazing PR work and stuff. There is a person who does relationships with bookshops. All of them are building their own character, their own profile, and they are actually going to become even better over time. So I think that's a short form of saying that when I think about running a publishing press, I'm thinking about actually how am I growing my colleagues alongside with me. So end of the year, when we go to Frankfurt, my colleagues are going, and I'm so happy. It's like, wow, go and represent for us. I don't have to be there because I want to do other things as well. So if you ask me, running a publishing house is about setting a direction that hopefully will pass on, because in Singapore, art and culture, we are struggling all the time. And then the poor theatre practice, please go and donate to them. Like, wow, their store caught fire, and then $200,000 of things burnt and things like that. How difficult life can be when you're already struggling. So if we don't build a team, and if we do it willy-nilly, right, like maybe do it as an independent publisher, I can have a very, I feel, enjoyable existence as well, but I don't know whether there will be anything that will be passed down. And I find that Singapore literature, why are we like needing to grow in this way? If you don't have a history, you don't have a legacy, how can you create something new that has meaning and relevance beyond your current moment? So that's why, for me, this is really something that I care for a lot. Yeah.
Thank you, thank you. So the publisher as a custodian of culture. Come. No, it's great. Big shoes to fill. Thank you.
I hear his pain, but I don't.
You only hear the pain. I thought there was some joy in there.
No, I love pain. But anyway, as a journalist, I understand the stress and the deadlines. But this is about running a literary publication, right? Whatever. So I don't run a press anymore, but I run with my co-editors a literary journal, the QLRS. I see the difference in the opposites of the problem that they face as a profit and loss kind of organization that needs to worry about the livelihood. So the beauty, I think, is the same for you. Maybe you can speak for yourself. But QRS is completely, we are not paid, right? Yeah. We ourselves not paid. We don't pay the contributors. So I guess when I...
You know, when I tell the students, they're in shock. When I tell them this is a former director of SWF, and he has been doing this for 20 years for free. We've got a banker who's doing it for free. We've got Shu Hong, who's a university lecturer who does it for free. They're in shock, right?
Yeah, so I think what I come to realize, I can't speak for the other editors, for myself, when I wanted to join QRS, I think at the core of it is that, why am I doing this for? What does QRS serve in the context of the Singapore literature scene, or now called Singlit? I would say that it has consistency, and it has managed to grow a scene of new writers who are discovered by us, as they are new writers discovered by other journals. So the consistency to me is important. So I decided that I want to contribute as an editor. Even though I contributed, I'm an editor in a short story section. I don't write that many short stories, but poetry is by Sin Min. And then, of course, the other editors. What I realized that because we're not paid, we do it purely our passion. Yeah. Which also means that I'm not going to tolerate nonsense, which means that I don't have time to go back and forth with submission, not pretending, they're actually asking for advice, feedback. Yeah. If you want that kind of feedback, that means you are asking me to give you consultation, which means you have to pay me. So therefore, I only accept submissions which are 100% or 99% ready. If I feel that there is still potential, there's one more layer, I would just say, this part, maybe you want to work on it, or this tone. But generally speaking, I don't even offer any feedback for the first time, the rejection email, until the first day, do you mind giving me some, short? I will do that the second email, then I will not do it anymore.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
That's it.
Yeah, thank you.
Kai Chai is so nice. Like you give feedback if they ask you in the second email. I mean, like I was saying, these days, like I just can't be bothered because there's no time. Like, I mean, because I edit the journal alone. On average, just give an idea of like the volume that comes in. It used to be a lot more manageable. Like even say maybe 3 to 5 years ago, it was like maybe 5 submissions a day, 10 is like bumper crop. These days, like the daily average is more like 20
Really?
to 25.
Oh my goodness, it's
a
gotten
bad day
worse.
is like 30 plus
Yeah.
kind of thing. And okay, I guess part of it is also my own fault because like
Yeah.
I have there's this website called Duotrope
Yeah.
that kind of
Listed
tracks
you.
these statistics for journals and sort of publication markets, right? And they have a ranking list of the top 25 fastest and the top 25 slowest, top 25 most sort of generous in the sense of welcoming to take in the percentage accepted versus rejected versus top 25 most challenging. So like I think I am currently the number one in terms of reply speed. Yeah. It was like a fight between me and Soft Blow for a time.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So I think I'm definitely like number one currently and have been for a while. Because I'm committed to that 24-hour turnaround.
Wow.
Like I think I've honed it to an art. Like I can read the submission anywhere
To this
on my
day,
phone. Yes, like it's 24 hours. Like the only time that it has ever slipped even a little bit was the time that I had an eye infection, and so I literally couldn't see, and I was like in bed for like half the day because my eye was literally like covered, and so that was the only time when I actually put an auto reply into the Gmail to say, like, I'm literally blind, so I may not reply within 24 hours as advertised. Like, sorry, I guess, like, I mean, I'm doing this for free. Like, what would you expect, right? But currently, yes, I'm quite committed to this 24-hour thing. So it does, like, you kind of have to fit it in around all the things you do. Like, when you're commuting to work or commuting back or commuting here or whatever, you just read something. And because I'm quite clear after sort of a decade plus what I like and what I don't, and what I'm looking for, what surprises me and what doesn't. The clear-cut things are very clear-cut. Just know. In fact, it's gotten to the point where, maybe I shouldn't say this because like it's streaming online, but I secretly schedule...
Oh my goodness, are we streaming online?
Isn't it? It's just, yeah. But okay, it's fine, whatever. They'll never know if they are the ones who are affected. But what I do is that I schedule...
Sorry.
I schedule the replies to go out so that they are at least 1 hour after people sent it in. Even though sometimes, because the bulk of the submissions come from the US, so we're like 10 to 12 hours apart. So when they are sort of busy sending out work, it's when I'm online, like checking email, watching TV or whatever. And so something comes in, then I'm like, okay, it's not great. Like, I just want to reply immediately. Yeah. But I realize that people get really offended when you reject them within like 15 minutes. Like, even though everyone who's kept waiting by an editor for like an extended period of time gets offended that they've been kept waiting too long. So how to win, you tell me, right? Reply too quickly, people get offended. Take too long to reply, people also get offended. Yeah. So I've decided that the happy medium is, just since Gmail allows it, just schedule it to go out at least 1 hour after they sent it in.
Wow.
So that, it looks like you've read it and you've thought about it and made a decision. But actually I'm not paying you money to publish you. You're not paying money to me to submit. I think we can just get through it very quickly, actually. So you just kind of fit it in around your daily life. So
Yeah. No. Yeah, and that's why, I've had thousands of rejections, so I've got very thick skin by now. So that's why I think writers shouldn't ever feel, down when they're rejected, because of the singularity thing you talk about, right? It's really that.
Yeah, when someone else out there, some other
like
editor may like the work.
So thank you. So that's the sort of professionalism that we're talking about as well, right? And we wish that it went both ways, right? But very quickly, I'm just going to jump a few questions and ask you about the larger publishing ecosystem. Publishing in Singapore has evolved considerably, so just share with us your views on where publishing in Singapore is at now. It's a very humble industry, but what do you think, the future holds for publishing here? Big question.
I really love that institutions like QRS are still running.
Yes, institution.
It is a very important, critical place, So, and then, I didn't know how much work went into what.
People think it's a lot of work. It's just like how you optimize the systems for yourself. And because it's one-man job, so can optimize very easily.
But I respect critical reviewers and reviews, because without that reading, the work actually means much less. If you don't really have a group of people who are professionally dedicated, and I mean professionally, I don't mean you need to be paid, but you are actually reading it with a professional view. So you are creating that kind of leveling of understanding for those who are interested to find out. They have a reference point. So why I refer to critical, the critical scene is because in Singapore, I think arts and culture, we don't have enough critical discussions. You can see how that is because even before the Straits Times started to lose credibility for circulation, right? They had a lot, they did have more pages on arts and culture. Then over time, maybe it's because they don't see a market for it, I'm not sure, just less and less. So when you say the future for publishing, I do hope that QRRS will find successors to your work, because that's really very important to continue, right? Then for publishing, I have looked at the number of independent publishers. I don't think they are increasing that many, if you think about it. And you think about who is taking over. So being realistic, I would say that we are really at this point where I thought the golden age, so-called, when I joined the industry 2014, it was about then, 2015, 2017, a lot of things going on, lots of activities, and then, new kids on the block and all. But now, the number of independent publishers, I'm rooting for one that I hope will emerge soon to do poetry. So that one will be very important also. So I feel that why we need volunteers and also professionals is because when professionals are able to do their work and be supported by readers, there is the logic of the economy that will give extra hands and legs, so you have new people joining the industry. If everybody is volunteers, right, there is a very missing gap, because you can't demand volunteers. So that's why I think this balance needs to be there. But I must say that at this moment, we need more people to join the scene. But if there's no perceived future or not enough to make in this industry, then that will dampen enthusiasm. And our government is very good at promoting IT, but not really good at promoting arts and culture, I do believe. So I hope we can do more there. Yeah.
Why are you looking at me? I'll speak about it as a reader who consumes the things that get put out by the publishing market. I would say that I think one of the challenges that publishers face, not just here, but I guess the problem is particularly acute here, because is the competition for attention, right? The attention economy. There are just so many other things that you could do besides read a book, where the barrier to entry is just lower. And I think that the people here are generally sort of the converted or the partially converted, whatever you want to call it, with an interest in it. And I think what I would hope to see as a reader is more work that comes out that speaks to the contemporary interest that we have today as readers. So I personally like the things that Ethos puts out for non-fiction, because I feel that it does speak to issues that we should be interested in this day and age. And that's why I really hope that those books find a readership both here and beyond, since you're doing ebooks now very consistently. But maybe when it comes to things like fiction, for example, I don't think a lot of fiction writers in Singapore understand what people read these days or want to read in terms of how that affects their own practice as writers. So I write mainly poetry, so I guess I can't really sort of criticize too much. But as a reader, there's just a lot of choices that I could make besides reading a Singaporean book, in that sense, if you know what I mean. So it is exciting to see people like Rachel Heng's book, The Great Reclamation, which tells a very Singaporean story, but in a very sophisticated way that packages the message in a way that resonates with people beyond just Singapore. And I think that's the thing that kind of is missing for me as a reader. I want to see stories that show Singapore and how it relates to the world. So I don't just want to read about Singapore, because, I mean, I live in Singapore, right? I literally experience the reality that you are describing in the story. I don't need to read a fiction book to experience it. I think it's what I'm trying to get at. So to me, I think that is one of the directions that I wish fiction in particular here would go. I'm not as concerned with poetry because I feel like poetry is quite timeless in a way. Like, as long as it speaks to you in that particular moment, it will do. But I think for fiction, because it just is a much greater investment of time to read a novel, right? So if you want to get readers, you need to meet them at where their interests are. And I think that is maybe a gap in the fiction market that isn't kind of being served as well currently.
Thank you very much. Kai Chai?
I agree with both of them, what they say, so I'm not going to repeat what they say, but I'll just have one proposition about the idea of publishing in Singapore. Because I've been saying this, I've been almost like a broken record, but the fact that you always think that the publishing in Singapore is quite limited, right? It's only this small market. But then I'm always impressed by what Renee Ting is doing with Singapore Art Book Fair. So someone who has attended a couple of the editions to see the number of stalls, the people who turn out, who queue up to get in. I don't know whether there is a kind of a white space between the art book scene and the literary publishing, or whether you call it commercial publishing, because I think those two don't seem to mix for some reason, and I want to propose that they should, because in the current literary scene, you can't price a certain book beyond a certain price because people don't pay more than $20 for a book of poetry, something like that. So this is one of those, I guess, cliches. But then in the art book fair, which I'm sure some of you have been, how much are the books priced at? They're amazingly like $50, could be hundreds of dollars. And there are how many words inside there? I mean, so is the idea that you're willing to pay for this art book, which is suspect, why is this art book? And why is a poetry book or a fiction book must be $24 or $20? Somewhere in between, I think there is, the two should be fused. I have said this many times about, you have to change the idea of a book being purely for content. You got to treat the whole thing as something that you want to desire to own, so that you have the idea of FOMO, like, oh, this book, I want to have it. I may not understand it, but I want to have it. So if you're able to crack that code, then I think you're able to sell more books, even for supposedly genre or poetry books, whatever. And I think that's where we got to think imaginatively. I mean, I just leave it at that because that is my kind of manifesto.
No, that's great. That's great. I'm so sorry. We've been enjoying this discussion so much that I forgot that we could take questions, right? So does anyone have any questions that are pressing and they want? Yeah, come. Wow, from ACS, my alma mater. Come. Yes, your name?
Oh, my name is Zachary. I'm from ACSI Year 5. So I think this is something that Kai Chai raised, right? Where he said that, writers may not be as willing now to change because there's a lot of avenues for publishing. Whereas last time you need to get awards or win favors and so on and so forth. But personally, I don't really have any accomplishments behind it. But I did send in a manuscript for Ito's books, and I'm curious because I feel like if you don't really have any like, oh, I never won any awards or never really have any experience, would it be like, oh, you as a writer it's not established enough to be able to write, to publish, to get any book published? So, I mean, I want to know about what's your thoughts on all that. Yeah.
What's your name again? Zachary Chong. Zachary Chong. Oh, you better
I'll
look
go
at
and
your slash pile.
search Zachary Chong. How
That's
do we
one of the
reply?
ways, Zachary, to get noticed, right? Just come to a conference and say, you're the one, Kage. Okay.
You're saying that if there's no platform because you are not accepted for publishing, what are certain like follow-ups and things like that?
Like not much of a portfolio in a sense, would that dampen your chances of possibly getting a book published?
Actually, no, because for independent publishing houses, right, we are in fact configured to take on new authors. This is why we are called independent, because independent of commercial pressures in however we can do that, right? So it's not a disadvantage that you're not known. And actually, sometimes, right, if you're known, right, there's a lot of pressure. Just imagine a very famous author, and then just imagine that the famous author gets rejected, right? Okay, but the fact is that sometimes, right, is the rejection. I think Desmond and Kai Chai, you all mentioned something about how rejection happens for so many reasons. So it's not because you are not known, at least for the independent publishing house. It's not because you're not known, for sure. Yeah.
I always like to tell people that all writers started out without the prizes or without the first book, right? Before my first book got published, I had over 100 rejections from American publishers. So it's fine. Yeah. So you just get used to it. Anyone else has any? And then after my 15th book, I got another 100 rejections from American agents. So I'm really, really used to it. Okay. So it doesn't matter at which point of your career, right? Anyone else has questions? Tai An, yes.
I'd like to take up something that Kai Chai said about Ezra Pound and T.S. Eliot. Now, as you all know, I teach close reading. That was So I read very closely. And I find three things which you all haven't brought up. And that is the relationship between the editor with a good literary or writing sense and the writer. Now, have you heard of the famous editor, Diana Atwood?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. And Somerset Maugham used to change publishers whenever his editor left, right? So one question I would like to ask is, and also Kage's point about writers objecting to any changes, okay? Is this dynamic? I pick up many a book published locally, and I say, such a pity the literary editor didn't tell this first writer with the first book to omit this, omit that, and that you're not ready for your first book yet. Wait, okay, that's one. Two, copy editing, right? That's another failure I find. Okay, and third, and that is again, a dynamic, right? How do let me ask you your experience about the literary editor rendering a work, coming back to your point, Kai Chai, Ezra Pound, better, right? Should this paragraph be here, right? Should this ending be like that, right? What about this run online? Do you think this stanza ought to be here? Do you all do that? Right? Okay, right. Because I had a very unhappy early experience with a book that was not proper. That was, I think, may have been edited, but the author did not attend to the editing. So there was a lot of grammatical errors and a lot of typos. And so you're not sure, particularly with poetry, whether it was intended or not intended. So that is at the worst level when the editors are not doing their job. But I'm interested in the creative interplay between a good literary editor and the writer, such that the writer feels that after the literary editor has been through, my work has improved, right? What has been your experience, particularly those of you who have been poets and have published like Kai Chai or yourself? Have you encountered editors who have helped you?
That's a huge question. Everything from proofreading, copy editing, developmental editing, structural editing, right? All the tiers of editing. How much? Shifting paragraphs around, stanzas around. You know, we're going to take this one, right? So, yeah, come.
Okay. So I mentioned just now that with my first book was Landmark, right? So it was with Leslie Yao. I don't know whether any of you remember her. She was good. She was, I mean, I was a young writer, youngish, I guess not as young as you. But she explained to me why she decided certain poems are not to be in and blah, blah, blah. Essentially, she took out some of the weird poems, like what I think are the experimental ones. But I think at the end of the day, I realized, okay, she has a reason, and by taking out this poem and shifting it and retitling it from something else, Secret Man, she has a reason. So I think, okay, that's fine. I'm open. I'm not that egotistical. I'm still egotistical, but I'm not that egotistical to say that I don't want to hear any contrarian view. So from a first-time writer, I was of the mindset that they should know better, right? They are in this business of selling books. They know what would the reader want. So I was with that mindset, and I thought, okay, it came out more or less sound. I was still particular about the font and stuff, so I can live with it. I have seen a lot of first-time books which I hate because they are horribly edited, the copy edited very badly, the margins are all wrong. Essentially, it's all the visual thing that I can see that it's terribly wrong. So don't even talk about the quality of the poems. But subsequently, it's not that I don't, because Leslie was, she moved overseas, as Siak knows. But otherwise, it was my current editor, Enoch Ng of First Fruits, who approached me, who said that, oh, I read your poems from this book and also on some journal, and he approached me and then he said that, I'm curious about where you come from, as in how you're writing. So it's not really about the next manuscript, it's about what you are as a writer. And I think getting to know the editor as a person, as an equal, as a peer, to find out how he thinks and how his mind thinks, gives me confidence that this person is going to make my work better. And I trust, so my trust grows. I think it has to be 100% trust. Otherwise, I think I would have jumped. Yeah. I think that's, in short, yeah.
I think I remember when I spoke to a professor who's an editor of a publishing house in the US. They don't touch any of the poetry manuscripts. Basically, if anything needs any editing, they don't even buy it. They don't take it. And that's very different what's happening in the US and here, because US, the market is big, still much more supply of manuscripts and demand, but a big national level poetry competition for a book publication, it's a book award, could receive 1,500 manuscripts. And people are paying $100 US to submit for consideration, of which only one out of the 1,500 gets a publishing contract. So you can see that the publisher there really doesn't have to touch the work they choose. It has to be ready to go. All they have to do is slap on a cover and design. So understanding the culture there of publishing, I've realized that actually the only books that get made are the ones that will go right to design anyway. It doesn't need rechapterization. It doesn't need any work. Also, that comes from the whole economy of the whole MFA system. You've got so many graduates from an MFA program who have book manuscript ready manuscripts, and they're all sending to these presses. So, and there are good manuscripts not even being published, right? But it's very different for the more indie presses, perhaps also, where they will have that good relationship between. But of course, once you see a bad book, you see a bad book, just like Tai An says. If the mistakes are glaring, then we know, right? So that should never happen with a good press, right? So why don't you weigh in? Why don't you weigh in on that? Has that ever happened? Have you ever, let slip? And maybe you'll have the last word on it. Yeah. In terms of editing.
Maybe I think there are so many different types of writers and types of editors, but I think as an editorial house, right, as a publishing house, we need to be ready for all the different types of writers. Because some writers, right, it's like Desmond, as you say, ideal would be, don't need to touch my manuscript, go straight to print. And you respect the person that way, because if you go and touch it, it makes the person feel like you are cheapening their work. So you have to be, I think we have to be savvy also to understand who is this person we are working with. And then there's also the kind of writer who it's more like music and jamming, where they are creating something together with you. Mm-hmm. And there's no real sense of ego at stake, which is also another very interesting kind of free play. Mm-hmm. And if you are in that kind of relationship, it can become truly very rewarding, because all the parties involved, you are then able to look at the work as something that has no origins, if you think about it. It becomes like almost like a collective endeavor.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. And hence the importance of the publisher-author relationship. So on that note, we've already overrun, but I think it's been so wonderful to have this conversation. I wish we could go on for hours, right? But we're all good friends, and that's the beautiful thing about being in a small country where everyone knows everyone, that there's a lot of trust, right? So thank you so much, everyone, for being with us, trusting us with your Friday evening. Thank you to Ian, Kai Chai, and Kage for doing the wonderful work that you do. Thank you so much. All right, have a good evening, everyone, and please enjoy the rest of the festival for this weekend and next weekend. Thank you so much, NLB, NAC, PFS. All of you are lovely. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.